Here we go, Eric Nicksick.
Let's do this.
Thanks for coming in.
Man, what a setup.
Pretty nice setup, right?
It's a lot better than the COVID years, right?
It sure is. But the COVID years were like needed for me because I was like, the Tonight Show is going virtual.
Right.
The Tonight Show is on Zoom. My show can be on Zoom.
But you know what's crazy about COVID, you and I talked about this quite a bit, was it became about perspective.
Yes.
Right? So you can find ways to be successful. You can find new things to do, new skills to build, if you have that right perspective during that time. And I think this is really when your podcast took off, was that COVID era.
Yeah, because I could do it in numbers. I didn't have to be in person all the time.
Yeah.
But you're a Hall of Famer on my show because this is your third time.
Hey.
And if you want history of Nicksick and his story, you can go back and listen to the first time that we did it together when there was no video.
Yeah.
If you just want to go listen to it, it was fantastic. We got the whole life story. So I'm going to summarize it. Let me know if I get anything wrong so that we can get to our subject of the day.
Let's do it.
Vegas native, big-time football player growing up, was going to go play college football at University of Wisconsin, recruited there, ended up at Nevada, Reno, then ended up at a junior college. Ultimately, your football career doesn't happen the way you want it to.
Yeah.
Then you're at kind of a precipice in life. You got to pick something to do. You were going to be a firefighter, and then some troubles from your past popped up, and now you're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much sums it up.
So the subject of today is how to reinvent yourself, because you very much did that.
Sure.
What do you remember about being in the shoes when, after that incredibly brief summary, you're kind of looking for what to do in life?
Yeah, so a big switch flipped with me when I remember being angry at everything and everyone around me because of my shortcomings. I was very much a finger pointer. And I think that the reality of it was, I don't know if it was my nature or just whatever, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like everything that I was mad at was on me. Like all the things that I did wrong and all my shortcomings and all the things that I messed up in school or all the things that I got, get in fights. I'm like, wait a minute, this is my fault. This is on me, right? I got in this big fight in the college dorms in Reno that got me kicked out of school. And essentially, it was over some girl drama, right? And I was so mad at that girl. Like, she did this to me, right? And then, so she used to come by the bar that I worked at. And for 6 years, I was just mad, right? And then one time she came in and I was like, why is she here? Why does she always come in here? And then a freaking switch just flipped on me. And I'm like, you know what? She never did anything wrong. It was me that started the fight, that got in the trouble. And it was this weird, kind of just epiphany on my behalf. And I needed that. And I'm like, you know what? I need to start taking accountability for where I'm at and my shortcomings. That was one of the bigger pivotal moments that I remember, distinctly remember going, hey man, that's on me, And then as time went on, I think having a spouse like my wife, she's not afraid to tell you what you need to hear, right? And I think we all need that in our lives. Even my coaching career, and you and I were kind of talking about Dean Thomas, but there's people that I have in my life that they're not afraid to tell you what you need to hear, right? And there's a saying I love you too much to leave you the way that you are. I want people around me that will hold me accountable for my shortcomings or things that I'm doing wrong in my life. And having my wife, she would challenge me in a way where, yeah, man, it hurt on the front end. Right? She'd tell you stuff like, hey, you're lazy, or you're this, or you're that. And your natural mechanism is defense. Your natural instinct is well, I have to defend myself for whatever it is. The truth of the matter is she was 100% right. And I started to look at those things and go, you know what? I got to change this. I have to start changing the way that I look at myself and start changing the way I look at my shortcomings, right? Everything I wanted to do was to be a firefighter. Well, that was taken away because of my background. Well, this was this person and this person. Nope, that's on me. That's on me. So once that started to happen, it opened so many doors of figuring myself out in an actual, I guess, therapeutic way.
Mm-hmm. Do you still find you're fighting against the knee-jerk defensive response? Because that is a big problem for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever goes away. But I'm hoping it does, because I've acknowledged that it's a problem for me too. And I'm comforted to hear that was an issue for you. It's my wife will tell me stuff. I'll initially be defensive about it and try to make the case for my actions, and then it'll be like, she's kind of right, and this happens a lot, so why don't I just listen to her the first time?
Yeah. Well,
but I think it's natural to defend your actions.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's natural, but a lot of times when we just kind of take a step back and look in the mirror, in that accountability mirror, if you will, right? And you're like, okay, if I look at this from a different perspective, or there's history behind these actions, and over time, maybe they haven't said something to me in something that's been bothering them in 2-3 years, right? And this is something of repetition. Maybe you weren't accustomed to hearing those things at that time or that moment, but when you look at it from a different lens, I think that's when you're like, okay, you know, especially somebody you love and you care about, right? If that's somebody that you don't respect, you don't love, or you don't care about, a lot of the stuff you see on social media, you just discard. But when it's the people that you've selected to keep around you in your circle, that's when things become, I think, very important to listen to that constructive criticism, if you will.
So when you realize that you're a finger pointer and that you need to change, the world doesn't need to change, you kind of need to change.
Yeah.
What do you do then? Because you're still kind of looking for something to do.
Yeah. At the moment, I do remember being at Couture's. I mean, I was already started to train there. And
why did you start training there?
Honestly, it was just a matter of being around individuals that lifted my morale, that kept me accountable. It obviously the physical side of things was super gratifying.
Right.
I loved being in that gym, but it was just really the camaraderie and the continuity that I think that the team was having, and the culture that Randy was building. That's the thing I think that I lacked the most when I didn't have football. Yes, of course you missed playing the game, but it was more the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and like-minded individuals, right? Like everybody's hitting the weight room, everybody's, you know, watching film, and everybody's on the practice field and doing things together. So once you take that uniform off, I think you kind of lose your identity. And that's what I felt. But when I stepped into Xtreme Couture, I felt like I had an identity again. It wasn't that I wanted to go in there and be this pro fighter or all these things, but I wanted to be around like-minded individuals that were, each of them were pushing themselves in a positive direction, right? In the bar industry, you get off of work, everybody wants to just get off work and go drink, gamble, you know, if you smoke cigarettes or smoking cigarettes, right? And that was the culture of what you were around. And then I just started to realize, like, look, this is not what I want for my livelihood. You start fast forwarding your life and looking at the people that are, you know, 50 some odd years old, still doing the same thing in repetition.
Yeah.
Man, I got to break this cycle. The bar industry, the service industry in Las Vegas.
That's right, because you were a bartender.
Correct, yeah. And I would work at night. I worked from 8 to midnight. It was a 4-hour shift, but I'd split an 8-hour bucket. So my GM would work 4 to 8. I would work 8 to midnight, and you'd make insane amount of money. In the nightlife and the service industry in Las Vegas, you can make career money.
Yes.
It's insane. But it's the responsibilities that it comes with, right?
Right.
Like getting off of work and going home. The problem with that is you tend to ostracize yourself from that community, right? Hey, Eric, let's grab a beer when you get off of work, or let's go see this bartender, or let's go to the strip club, or whatever it is. And you say no 10 times, then they're just not going to invite you. Now you're just the guy they don't want to hang around. But for me, it was, I wanted to get up in the morning and I wanted to go train with Mike Pyle, right? Or I wanted to train with Dennis Davis. Like, I wanted to be in the gym. My life was going in a different direction, and it started to consume me. I think everybody has an addictive personality to some nature, right? And it's finding the things that are positive to be addicted to, and that became Xtreme Couture for me.
So when you were training and finding that camaraderie, it wasn't a career move, right? You weren't like, I'm going to be a fighter, I'm going to be a coach, I'm going to be a gym manager. What did you notice when you kind of found yourself in that world more and more, where you're like, wait a second, I like belong to this world now? It's like I started playing piano in 2020.
Right.
I wasn't like, I'm a piano player.
Right.
But now I'm kind of like, I'm a piano player, I guess.
A piano player,
you know?
Yeah.
So for you, what was that in the fight world where you're like, I'm not a bartender. I'm a fight world. I'm an MMA guy.
Coach, yeah.
You know, I'm a coach. What was that transition like for you, kind of acknowledging that?
I think it was more of a process for me. It wasn't like a certain moment, but the one that really sticks out to me was Jay Huron, when, you know, after one of the practices, and Jay's like, hey, what do you want to do in this career? What do you want to do in this field, if you will? And I just said to Jay, like, I always envisioned myself being a football coach, and I didn't really think about myself jumping into the MMA coaching realm, but I found myself coaching more and more and more. It just kind of stumbled upon me. I remember, I think a year into being at Xtreme Couture, a guy didn't show up to practice or to coach a class. And Randy's like, yo, E, I need you to run this class. Okay, no problem. And I did. And it turned out great. And he's like, hey, that's yours. You're going to keep that Friday class. So it just kind of, just snowballed from there.
Yeah.
But it was really Jay that like really checked me on like, hey, I think you have a path here. What do you think about coaching more? And I'm like, man, I would love to. I think that would be a pretty cool gig. And then here's Jay, big bro. Okay, man, here's what you need to start doing, right? He goes, at the young level of MMA, guys are trying to bring specialty coaches. You need to be an MMA coach. So Jay's like, you need to learn how to wrap hands. You need to learn how to hold pads. You need to have your wrestling up, your grappling up. You need to be able to do it all. So when you go on the road with these fighters, that they can bring you one coach, and it saves a lot of money, especially at the lower level. So that's kind of what, when Jay told you something, it was gospel. It's like, okay, boom, done.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really, for me, where I just started like, okay, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And that's where I felt like my career started to take off.
What advice can you give? Because other people out there that are listening, like I want the show to help other people.
Sure.
And not everybody's going to make a career change to be an MMA coach,
Right.
but there's plenty of people out there that are looking for something different that might feel stuck.
Right.
What advice would you have for them?
I mean, the same thing that you just talked about playing the piano. I remember being a kid and a guy like learning how to skateboard at like 39 years old, and like me going like, what is this dude trying to learn how to skateboard for? Right. And my friend at the time, who's a little bit older than me, he's a fire captain now for Henderson Fire. And I always he's like, why not start something at any time? You don't put a number or limit on learning, right? Like you can always go back to school. You can always learn more. You can always find room for growth.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me at a very, very young age, like watching this goofball dude trying to learn how to skateboard, and I would tell people, it's like, if that's something you want to do, don't let somebody else's perspective become your reality. Mm-hmm. Go out and do it. Go try it. Why not? Because you might find all of a sudden you're a piano player.
Yeah. Yeah. I also in 2020, to get outside, added skateboarding as a hobby for about 2 months. Uh-huh. And then I like busted my hip. So many people were just like, what are you doing? And I was just like, I had that same approach that guy was just like, well, why not, man? I could do it. Imagine me carving this up at 42. Like, that'd be great. I felt like one time my wife's just like, what are you doing? And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. So
I always wanted that van sponsor.
There's other things. What's funny is like, like how to reinvent yourself. I thought this is a perfect subject for you, and I was just Google searching last night, right? Mm-hmm. Like how to reinvent yourself, and then like the blogs, 5 ways to do this. And it's funny to hear your story, because like the bullet points that come up are like, do you need a career change, or are you contemplating a career change, which you did, right? Mm-hmm. Was it a crisis? Were you dealing with a crisis of like your personality or in your personal life? Not like a specific tangible crisis, but like, was that part of it for you?
I would say so, in the fact that like you put so much time and effort into getting into a career field in the fire service, and then being, going through the entire process and getting hired, and then go, hey dude, remember that fight you got in like 9 years ago or 7 years or whatever it was?
That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was that long before.
Yeah. And hey, sorry, we can't hire you at this moment. There's other routes you can take, but we can't take you at this moment. So all those eggs that you put in that basket of making yourself the best candidate to be hired, at the time, I think that it was a city in North Las Vegas did a conjoined test, and it was like 6,000 people that tested. I was number 2, right? Like, I'm getting hired. I got hired by both departments. I could have picked between city of North Las Vegas and city. And the thing was they're doing a conjoined test, so when they do the background, you got eliminated from both. Mm-hmm. So that's like, well, now what? What am I going to do now? But I was fortunate enough to have my foot in the door at Xtreme Couture.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much when the time when Randy was like, hey, what do you think, man? You want to take over the gym? So having that there definitely helped me.
Yeah, it was like a career crisis.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
You ever wonder what would happen if you
every day
would have been a firefighter?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And I think it's one of those things that you feel incomplete in not checking the box off. Being like kind of a perfectionist in a lot of ways. I still talk to like guys that I worked with in the firehouse when I was doing like rides and clinicals and things like that. Captain Phil Royalty, I talked to him last week. Very, very pivotal in a young kind of mindset for me, right? Like there's things that I'll do to this day as a team guy that I identify as like from Phil, right? Like I remember sitting down for chow, we're all eating together. I jumped up and went and got a drink, and I came and sat back down, and Phil was like, "Hey, I'm good." And I'm like looking around. He's like, "No, I'm good." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're good?" He goes, "Dude, you just got up and got yourself a drink, but while you're up, you didn't ask if your team needed anything. You didn't ask if I needed anything. You didn't ask if for anything." And always resonated with me. Like to this day, you know, I make sure to check. Yeah.
Here's the story. Eric texted me if I wanted anything at Starbucks, and I texted him back, 5 minutes later or something like that. He was already here with that coffee. He turned around, he went and got me this coffee.
So I did.
You live it, man.
I live it. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's that leaders eat last mentality, but putting your team in front of you. And that's something that a lot of ways I learned because of my time in the firehouse, you know. Yeah. Although I didn't get to wear the badge and I didn't have the career, there's so many lessons that I learned by being there and being around people like that. So I take a lot of pride in the fact that we have guys that now have changed over into the police department, and we have a lot of guys that change over in the fire department. Yeah. Dave Mazzani being one of them. He's in the fire academy right now. And Phil actually called me last week about Mazzani.
Wow.
You know, Phil's like, "Hey, I heard you got a guy." And he goes, "Let me tell you something. When I hear a guy that's coming through the Xtreme Couture gym,
right, and
now is coming through the fire academy, automatically instant clout."
Yeah.
And like hearing that from Phil, you're like, "Oh, dude, that's dope."
Yeah.
You know, so that very much I do regret and miss the fact that I didn't have that career. But it's something that I think like it's like there's a reason behind it. Like,
for
why,
sure.
You know?
Yeah. What's his name? Phil
Royalty.
So I'm going to take what you just told me and take that to heart, because I am not great at, like, I will order stuff for me, and then people, I could have helped somebody else. I could have checked if they wanted something. Happened in San Antonio just last week. Like, I ordered breakfast on Uber Eats, and then Megan O'Leary was ordering breakfast for herself and was passing around her phone like, "Hey, Paul, you want something? Biscuit, you want something?" And I was just like,
"Order up."
I don't know. Like, I didn't know if you know.
We did a little military tour. I've gone with George and Goes numerous times, and after the tour was over, King Mo sent me a voice message, and King Mo goes, "Bro, I just want to tell you, like, it was amazing just being around you and the way that you think." He goes, and he brought it up. He goes, "Man, I remember 3 different times at 3 different dinners, you were checking on your team first, make sure everybody had what they needed, and then you sat down and ate." It wasn't by like me, "Hey, here's how you do it." It was just me just doing it by nature, but King Mo picked up on it.
Yeah.
Left me a really nice message going, "Dude, like, I learned a lot from you just watching the way that you're a leader." That you know, coming from him meant a lot.
Yeah. All right, the next bullet point on reinventing yourself, needing a change. I mean, you kind of needed a change by default, right?
Correct.
I mean, so that's an easy one. Were you seeking more from life? Was there a part of you in that moment when you're like, life has to be more than what the path I'm going on right now?
100%. And a lot of that stemmed from showing up at the bar at 8 o'clock to clock in and do your shift, and you're sitting in a cloud of smoke, dealing with drunk people, you know what I mean? And disgruntlement was just written all over your face, right? And
like not having a joy for what you're doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hated it.
Even though you're making plenty of money.
It was never about the money. It was always about like the purpose, right? Just self-accusation, and you're just like, "Dude, this sucks. Like, I'm just breathing in cancer," you know? And it wasn't fair to the customers. Like, I wasn't mean, right? But I just had this like kind of edge to me where it's like, "What do you need now?" You know?
I know exactly how you're feeling. Yeah. We all have those jobs when we're at that age. How old are you? 25, 23?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I started at that literally like 3 months before my 21st birthday.
Okay.
And I was in that
No, I know you kept the shift until what? Like 3 years ago?
Oh, until COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then literally I was working Wednesday and Thursday nights. I was working 8 hours a week. I would show up, collect my money, do my job. And at that point,
Why'd you keep at it so long?
Because it was easy money.
Yeah.
And it was just another line of income for the household.
Yeah.
And at that point, until I took over the gym, right? The disgruntled, like when I had the gym, everything else, the bar was super easy from that point on.
It was like a social thing almost.
I let it all go.
Yeah.
The moment I took over the gym, so I've been gym manager 8-9 years now, right? Like, it's like the bartending stuff was a reprieve.
Mm-hmm.
I would show up and just, what's up? Hell yeah. They want to talk fights. They want to talk this. They want to talk that. Next thing you know, your shift's over. Grab your $400 or $500, high five, tip your bar back, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
You know, see you next week. They loved anytime I was gone, they didn't care. I can get my shifts covered. You know, I had the best shifts in Summerlin, right? Then people would come in to see you. You had all the gamers and everything else. But it was nothing changed. Nothing changed. It was the same bar. It was the same customers, same everything. But what changed was here, right? Mm-hmm. The mental perspective of when I showed up. Mm-hmm. I had something else to give me the self-actualization that I was looking for, right? And I was like, okay, now I feel accomplished what I'm doing, being a coach and being a gym manager, that this right here, this is no problem at all.
Yeah. When I lived in Vegas before, way back, before I got into TV, right? I'm sending out my resume tape everywhere, and I'm like, why can't I get an opportunity? I worked at the sportsbook at Bally's, and then I worked at Wynn.
Yep.
And I'm walking in my uniform every day from the back of house through the casino in my Wynn, brown button-down shirt and pants. It was like wasn't that bad looking compared to uniforms in Las Vegas, But I'm just like, gosh, I got a college degree, and I want to be on ESPN someday. Right. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
And to the point, like, where it's like now I'd almost be like, yeah, I'd go do that.
Yeah.
Like I go talk sports gambling and write some tickets for people and hang out. But it's like that time in your life when you're trying to punch up and prove that you're more, even though it's like we're all just the same. And I was such a dick. I mean, people liked me at work. It wasn't like I was an asshole at work. But I would always say this, and I like kick myself all the time that I used to say this to people. I would say, I'm just doing this until I get a real job.
I know, right?
I would say those words.
Yeah, for sure.
To somebody in their 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
Who's worked at Wynn for 5 years, 8 years.
Yep.
Worked in the sportsbook industry for 15, 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be like, I'm just doing this until I get a real job.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I'm just doing this until I use my college degree. Don't forget, I have a college degree.
Yeah.
And I look back and I'm just like, what an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, I hate that I said that. And they still gave me a card when I left.
For sure.
Then everybody signed it. Like, I wasn't a dick all the time.
Right.
I really was like a friendly, good guy, the guy that you see on TV.
Yes.
But I made it clear a lot of times, like, I'm going for something bigger and better. And I felt it was my own kind of weakness inside.
Right.
Feeling that I'm less than right now.
Yeah, but let me flip that on you. Do you think that by you telling yourself that it wasn't a part of the reason why you were able to accomplish that goal? Like, every day you woke up like, I'm bigger and better than this.
Oh, for sure.
100%.
There's silver linings to that.
For sure.
Like where, like I was offered a supervisor job pretty early on. Because, in Vegas, like if you're on it in Vegas, like if you come out here and you're a valet.
Right.
But you're motivated, you're smart, you got a mind of ambitiousness. You could be wearing a suit within 6-8 months.
Easy. So,
like, I never had any expertise in the sportsbook business, and within a year, I had gone from Bally's to Wynn. Wynn is still today probably the best casino on the Strip, one of. And then the people at Bally's came back and they were like, hey, can you be a supervisor back here? And I said no, because if I started wearing a suit and making some real money,
easy, slippery slope when it comes to
a lot of people in their 40s and 50s where I'm just like, oh, they came here in their early 20s and they didn't plan to stay here and work in the casino until their age right now. So, yeah.
My dad said that right when I got in the service industry. He was running the sports book at the Dunes for a long time. And he's like, yo, the moment you get in that service industry, the money, it's a trap, especially at a young age, because you think like, making $300-400 a night at a young age, like, this is $1 million a year, right, in my head.
So I'm making like, between 35 and 40K a year at Wynn, going to clubs with, my wife. Like, we had all the hookups at all the clubs. We're on the Strip all the time. Like, it was fun, And then I moved to Casper, Wyoming to cover high school sports and rodeos for $23K a year, right? Living in a, not exciting place.
Right.
It wasn't Vegas.
Yeah.
And, you're like living in an apartment, a townhouse that's not great and stuff. So it's a trap. It can be a trap to stay there.
What do you think flipped the switch for you?
What do you mean?
When working at Bally's, like, what was the thing that you go, dude, I gotta get out of this?
The switch that I realized needed to be flipped after being here for about a year was I need to not just apply for jobs that are on air. I need to get my foot in the TV door.
Smart.
So I started looking for jobs behind the scenes here in Las Vegas and then ultimately in Phoenix. Really could have been anywhere, but it's like, when you have that kind of small mind, you're just like, well, Phoenix is only 5 hours away. It's like, well, you're moving.
Right.
I'm not commuting to Phoenix.
Right.
But found a behind the scenes job in Phoenix, and ultimately then I'm in a newsroom every day. I'm rolling teleprompter, I'm printing scripts, I'm getting to do stuff with the sports department when I can, and then ultimately I'm so much more prepared to be on the air after that.
And essentially, you're learning all the trades of the whole business.
100%. I mean, so I was just very small-minded when I was here. I was like, because I got some bad advice, honestly, from a college professor that said, if you want to be on air, you should take on-air jobs. You shouldn't try to work behind the scenes and think that you're going to work your way to on-air. And it's just like, well, that's true. You're not going to go to ESPN as a PA and like eventually be reporting.
Yeah.
But he should have been like, but it would also help to get in the door, get some contacts, work it day to day.
100%.
For you, as somebody who coaches people at a very high level, world titles and UFC and the highest level of this sport, habits or goals? Do you know what I mean by that? Because some people are gung-ho on setting goals and achieving them, and other people say, I establish habits and the goals will take care of themselves.
I think a little bit of both. Now, the goals shouldn't be finite. I hate that, like, New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, and we have a year to accomplish it, right? I like, hey, we wrote down a goal. Here is the path, right, on how I feel like I can accomplish this goal. And I'm not putting a time limit on it. And goals can change. They can evolve, right? But all the while, I'm trying to find that correct path to get to where I'm asking to be. Now, that path is the habits, right? Doing the things properly over and over and over, being consistent in that craft or whatever it may be. And so I think there's a combination of both that really, the goals is like, okay, there's something down the line later on that I want to try to achieve. Right. That you have that like long distance thing, right?
Yeah.
But then there's that, hey, well, if I can do this over and over and over consistently, the small little things, like Fallis always says, consistency over time equals results.
Yeah.
That results was always the goal that you wanted.
Yeah.
But that C times T, right, over time, that's what really, to me, is the meat and potatoes of the accomplishment.
Sometimes I wonder, is setting the goal for a UFC fighter to become a champion? Sometimes I think that hurts them more than it helps them sometimes.
That's a good point. I think that puts a lot of, there's so much expectation, and that's essentially what you're going to hear from 90% of the people that get into this field, right? They want to be the champ.
Right.
That's what you want to hear, right? But a lot of times, though, that what they're saying comes with empty, I would say empty results, but they're not putting that effort in that you would expect to be a champion, right? So having guys like Francis and Aljo and Misha and Forrest and Randy that have been in the gym and seeing those extra things that they put in and showing the rest of the team of what championship expectations really look like, I think really helps having that mold in the gym, right? Like you're like, oh, okay, well, you want to be a champion. A lot of times you don't have to coach it. You can just go, look at what this guy does every day.
You're right.
He shows up early. He leaves late. He's doing all the little extra things. He's taking care of his body. Doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't party, doesn't do all these things. And that can help you in that regard. Now there's a skill set and there's everything else that comes into play. Right time, right place.
Yeah.
There's so many guys, I think, when we look at the UFC roster, we go, man, that dude could have been champion had this like gone a different way, or like this guy wasn't involved, or this fight would have won, or this judge made a different decision, right? But the circumstances that come into play, I think, really boil down to the preparation and being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that's where I think it hurts them, not because you shouldn't shoot for it, but they seem to want to attach themselves to something where there's not 5 factors out of their control. There's 165,000 factors out of their control.
Yep.
So I wonder if sometimes the pressure and the mentality of belt or bust can hamper them down when something doesn't go their way. Whereas if their goal was, I want to be like a recognizable name.
Correct.
Like I want to have a career based on fighting, based on competing at the highest level in the UFC or mixed martial arts or whatever it may be, because then that a lot of that is in your control.
Right.
You can learn a lot of different skills that can get you there where you don't need the belt attached to it.
And look, like at this highest level, the top 1% of fighters in the world, like there's so many great things that you can take about out of what you're doing at this level, right? And each time out, like this is why I love Dan Ige so much. It's like, yes, he has a championship mentality. The guy leaves 0 crumbs behind in any fight that we've ever had, right? Like there wasn't a fight where it's like, okay, Movsar didn't turn out a great fight for us, but I can look back and go, well, Dan didn't leave any stones unturned. He did everything he was supposed to do. Sometimes guys are going to be better than you that night. Now it's up to us to try to find how do you bridge that gap, right?
Yeah.
But in this sport, like fighting the best 1% in the world, you can't leave anything by chance anymore, right? You have to check all those boxes. And I think the goals, writing those goals down helps with those expectations as well, but gives you kind of a roadmap on how to get there.
Yeah. What are you working on right now to level up yourself?
Honestly, for me, I think trying to not necessarily disconnect myself from social media. I think you and I understand like social media is imperative in what we do, but it can also be a detriment a lot of times as well. I think you tend to compare. Like you're like, well, what is this? What are they doing that I'm not? And this and that. But it's also something that's very controllable. Like I don't have to go on Instagram. I have to be a good dad, right? I have to be a good husband. Those things are innate. Like we need to do those things. But you don't have to go and post something, right? That's on us. And then you don't have to read the comments and you don't have to look at this person's story. So I think for me lately is kind of, I think, disconnecting myself from the noise, especially after the Francis not re-signing. You get good and bad, but everybody wants to, social media, you're always connected. Like people can get to you way easier now, right? So it's like, okay, instead of this, I'm going to spend time teaching my son how to run a zig route or a fade, and I'm going to get off the phone. But we're so connected that like even then, I'm like, oh, it's almost like just like auto, like you just look and you want to check and you want to see for that like dopamine hit.
Yes.
So lately for me, I've been working on just trying to disconnect myself a little bit more and focus on the people that are right in front of me.
The ironic thing is I'm going to clip that and put it on Instagram, but I agree with all of it.
And I'm going to share it.
Last thing, do you have a book that you really like a go-to book?
I like a lot of stuff by Simon Sinek.
Simon Sinek.
Sinek, yeah. Leaders Eat Last was a very, very good book for me.
I like that one.
And anything that he really writes, I think, as far as like being in the corporate world or in a leadership role or how to lead a team, I think he's got some really good knowledge. I always liked books like with what Jocko did, and it's not really because of like the military, like you want to hear about war stories or anything like that, but people that are even above us when it comes to alpha, when you're talking about life or death situations and how to lead other men and alpha males in that scenario. I like hearing some of those things and really love talking to Tim Ige, Dan's dad, right? Like to be able to have a guy you can phone and that's a Master Chief in the Navy SEALs and talk about leadership things, just small little questions like things like that really helped me a lot. But that's I think one of my favorite books is Leaders Eat Last.
Excellent. Discipline equals freedom. That's a Jocko.
Yeah, Jocko.
That's a Jocko phrase.
Yeah, another one.
Says it all in 3 words.
Yep.
Eric Nicksick is my great friend. I'm glad we got the Starbucks story in there. Yeah. And I'm going to start asking more people if they need anything too. Thanks, Eric.
My pleasure.
Thanks for watching Fitz Nation on the UFC Fight Pass YouTube channel. My bosses would love it if you hit that UFC Fight Pass logo and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.